So what about you? Are you hiding? Are you seeking?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Decoding TV's coverage of The White Lotus, Season 3, Episodes 3 and 4. I'm David Chen. Joining me for our recaps of White Lotus, you can find her work over at Lainey Gossip. Sarah Mars, welcome back to Decoding TV.
Hi, Dave.
We are going to be diving into The White Lotus Episodes 3 and 4 today. Let's start by talking about our overall thoughts on these episodes. Like, how are you feeling the show is going at this point? And what's your favorite subplot that's going right now?
Well, I think we have more table setting in this season than we've had previously. Season 1 was 6 episodes, very tight. Season 2 was 7, little bit more space. This is 8, and they are hour-long episodes. They're 55, 57, 61 minutes. So I do think we have a little bit more table setting, which is making the pace of this season feel a little slower than previous seasons. I feel like it was only in episode 4 that we really start to have some stuff starts paying off, some things start crescendoing, we're feeling the momentum build. So I do think, like, does this need to keep getting longer? Probably not. 6 episodes might have been the right number out of the gate. As far as subplots, I am super into Belinda and all of her deal. Her son coming to visit, her little work flirtation with Pornchai, which I think is very fun and very low key, but I think it's a nice. This show needs a little bit of leavening. This season's very dark, as we said previously, compared to the previous seasons. Even it's very dark. So just having that little like rom-com feel of the hotel workers is like, it's cute, it's fun. I do like that she's starting to put pieces together about Gary Gregg. That has a little bit of a murder mystery feel. I do have one thing about that I want to call BS on, which is that this is a worldwide chain of 5-star resorts. It's like it is literally the 4 seasons. In the real world, all of these have been filmed at 4 seasons.
Yes.
If you work in a chain like that and 5 people die under mysterious circumstances at one of the locations, everybody else knows about it. So the idea that Belinda didn't know that Tanya was dead and that it was mysterious circumstances, I was like, no, she would. I mean, I understand for the purposes of the show, of having the moment of discovery and all of that. Like, I understand it, but I did feel like they would 100% be gossiping about this. Like, everybody would have a theory. Everybody would have their like pet conspiracy theory about it. But I just really love everything with Belinda. I think she is kind of carrying, I think Natasha Rothwell and Parker Posey are kind of carrying the comedic load of the season. And they're doing a really good job. And just Chelsea, Amy Lou Wood, I love her so much. I really, really, really want to know. Biggest mystery is not who is the body. Almost couldn't care anymore because I am so fascinated. Why is she with Rick?
Right. Yeah.
Like, what was the
whole back? Because I think when they first showed up, it's like, oh, maybe there's something about their relationship arrangement that we are not clear on. But it does seem like to be a conventional partner arrangement. And so it's like, what was the deal there?
He doesn't seem rich enough. He isn't charismatic. And I'm just
he's Walton Goggins, Sarah Mars. He's Walton Goggins.
And look, like, there's an attraction there. And I do think we do see little moments when it's just the two of them. We do see a little bit of sweetness. We see a little bit of genuine affection. But for me, it's like, there's not enough of that I'm like, girl, you're young, you're beautiful, you're so fun. Please find a better, whatever you're up to, just find better. Like, to demand more for yourself. He literally sicked a cobra on you.
Yeah, not great. I'm really enjoying the show so far. I think I've seen people describe this season as pretty slow paced, and I have to say, I agree. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. One thing I really like about the White Lotus, that's cool, is every episode covers one day. And it's like one day in a vacation week. And I just like that we know that the next episode is going to cover one day. And I really appreciate that. I was a little bit disappointed this episode because I thought for sure we were going to see what happened at the parties that these characters go off to. And then it's like, oh, because it's like at midnight probably. So they have to start the day over again. But in terms of, but I'm really enjoying the show. In terms of subplots, I think the Jacqueline Kate Laurie subplot, I'm really getting a lot of enjoyment out of, because I think it just does such a good job of capturing how people say things without saying them. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they're communicating, but they're not saying the things that they really think. And obviously, the three of them, it's such a sad story because they're each other's best friends, but the group dynamic is full of backbiting and
Yeah.
just really unfortunate disparagement. But yeah, I really enjoy that particular subplot. So anyway, those are some overall thoughts. We're enjoying the show so far. Things are pretty slow to pick up. I assume things are going to pick up pretty quickly in the episodes to come, but let's get into it. Let's talk about what happens in episodes 3 and 4. And we're going to spoil everything. So here we go. It's adventure time at the White Lotus, Thailand. Checking in on our ungrateful guests, we find the Ratliff's mid-breakdown, even though most of them don't know it. Victoria's having prophetic dreams of destruction. Timothy is abusing her lorazepam to check the F out. Saxon remains a full-on psychopath. Piper is pondering taking a permanent powder. And Lockie is getting negged for the sake of fixing his posture. What even is the wellness plan at the White Lotus? What are the in-universe reviews of these resorts like? Sarah Mars, you've written this recap. I'm curious, what did you mean when you said Piper is pondering taking a permanent powder?
Taking a powder. It's an old expression. It basically means to take a break from society. It will often pop up in like Victorian literature or early 20th century literature. She's taking a powder, darling. Just means like somebody has gone for a hysteria cure, or whatever the polite term was for somebody who's maybe drying out, an alcoholic who's perhaps whatever the barbaric early 20th century rehab was, would probably just prescribe heroin.
In her case, though, she's actually contemplating joining this meditation center for the course of a year after college, right?
Yeah,
kind of...
it seems to be. They haven't really said clearly. It seems to be a Buddhist temple that has some kind of live-in commune type situation, which I think is not super uncommon in that philosophy, that in that belief system. I do think that is a thing people do. Ashrams. Maybe that's what it is. They kind of, I feel like they leave it a little bit vague because Piper's family doesn't fully understand her interests in this belief system. They're not really taking it seriously. And I think we're only privy to the information she is sharing with her family. So it's not super clear, but I do think it's probably something that your parents probably would be a little bit like, is it a cult? But it's actually probably pretty harmless, maybe even good for you. So
I do think it's interesting that I think this is the second time in the White Lotus where a white person has gone to a location that has a different set of native people and has decided that they want to join up with them, right? This happened with the
Quinn Mossbacher
in season 1, and I am curious if the show has anything to say about that, right? Or what the show is saying about that.
I think it's deliberate. I do feel like it is one of the weaker points of this season, which I agree that this has been a little bit of a slow starter, which to my point is like, maybe we don't need 8 episodes. Maybe 6 was the right number.
Right.
But I do think we are repeating that cycle. Although I do think it's deliberate because I think Mike White is making a commentary on how Western white people, particularly the wealthy, latch onto Eastern philosophies or indigenous belief systems, indigenous spirituality, and sort of take that identity on. In Quinn's case, it was presented as it was a good thing for him. That might have changed his life for the better. He might be a better person for that experience. I'm not convinced that's going to be the case for Piper, because she is much, much more privileged than Quinn. And I have gotten into this with people in the real world who are kind of like, well, we've already seen the rich family on the White Lotus. And I'm like, y'all, the Ratliffs are a different beast. That is generational wealth that probably goes back to before the Civil War. it's a level of power that the Mossbackers did not have. And it's a more traditional family structure because the Mossbackers was very much about the mother being the breadwinner and how that made, I forget his name, but Steve Zahn's character, like how that made him feel and the things that he did because of that feeling of insecurity and emasculation. Whereas with the Ratliffs, it's a very traditional patriarchal structure. The dad is the breadwinner. Everybody looks up to their dad. They make a huge deal in these episodes about how Timothy is a pillar of the community and everybody looks up to him. And Piper, you're so lucky that your dad is a Boy Scout and all of that. And it's like, he's coming from a very rarefied world. They haven't said how rich the Ratliffs are, but having just been around that milieu of people, especially in the South, I have no problem saying they're probably a lot richer than the Mossbackers, and their money is a lot older. Their social access.
So on the outside, their circumstances are a little different. I think, is there going to be something other than white person is enticed by this other lifestyle or this other kind of spirituality way of life, and then is that where the conversation ends? Because that's where it ended with Quinn, right? It's like we saw him kind of paddle off into the distance, and that was it. And I am curious, like, if we're going to see something different for Piper in the season, if it's going to end with she's just like, hey, I'm off to the, but I'm curious. We'll see how it plays out. But yeah, it's interesting that like this is a common trope, and I think there's something, as you said, deliberate about it.
I think Mike White is doing a thing, but it is where I get a little nervous because he is a sole creator. He's the sole writer. He's the sole director. And going in that direction, especially if he's going to go deeper into it than he did with Quinn, should you have a collaborator from the culture weighing in?
Yes, some people have opinions about that question, Sarah Mars. Anyway, anything else about the Ratliffs to talk about this week? I have to say, Saxon cozying up to Gary Gregg's companion, putting the arm around her, that's like just really brazen, like
he's going to kill you. I mean,
that is someone who could literally murder you. Like
Chloe said, she thinks he has it in him. I'm just like, you are gonna. I truly feel in the pit of my stomach like a sickness, like a dread, a physical feeling of Saxon and Lachlan going off like that, because I'm like, Saxon's not gonna look out for his little brother, and Lachlan's a naive little baby deer. Like it's scary.
All right. So that's what's going on with the Ratliffs this week, or the last couple weeks. Should also mention Victoria had a dream of a tsunami. Not particularly subtle, but I'll take it.
And it is worth mentioning they are in Thailand. We are, 20? It's going to be the 20th anniversary of the Boxing Day tsunami, or it's the 20. Was that 2004? It was 2004.
Yeah, 2004.
So we're just past the 20th anniversary of the Boxing Day tsunami. And I think they actually say in the first episode, the tsunami was like the next.
Yeah, beach over, or a couple beaches
I guess
down.
the White Lotus was not super affected by that.
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting that they include a clip of the real thing, and then she's having prophetic dreams, and it's like, I don't know, a lot of people died. Like it's a really big thing to be in Thailand, and to invoke that event is like, okay. Okay. Again, like, should you have a collaborator?
Yeah, I agree. Well, we'll see if it all pays off in a really culturally sensitive way, Sarah. But I have some doubts.
It's a high wire act.
I have some doubts based on how the first two seasons have gone, but you know what? Let's keep going. Meanwhile, Jacqueline, Kate, and Lori continue having whatever the opposite of a fun vacation is. To Jacqueline's and Lori's horror, they discover Kate definitely voted for Donald Trump, but the women keep up their lifelong tradition of bearing resentments to visit a neighboring resort where Jacqueline is recognized, but also disgusted by the older, poorer vacationers at a 3-star travel destination. They then get caught up in a water fight amongst the locals, which seems fun, so of course they hate it. And as the episode ends, they're meeting some of their butler, quote unquote, friends to go partying for that night. I'm
They're
sure
gonna party
something.
with the Russian energy healer.
Yeah, I'm
Which
sure.
again, just dread.
I'm sure nothing bad's gonna happen there. Anyway, the conversation about Donald Trump, I thought, was just really well executed.
Yes.
The slow realization of, wait, you are a conservative, and she's like, no, of course not. I'm independent.
Are you a Republican?
No. I'm an independent.
But you didn't vote for Trump. And she's like, do you really want to talk about Donald Trump? You know, like, it's so perfect how that conversation mirrors how it would have unfolded in real life these days.
I've had that conversation, and that's very close to how it goes.
Yeah. Of just, hey, I'm not going to say the thing, but like, I'm going to deflect. We're going to change the subject. And it's who you least expect, Sarah Mars.
Well, she does live in Texas and go to a mega church, so
yeah.
And do we not expect it? But I do think it's interesting that they bring up her church attendance, because we are dealing with spirituality and with religion and faith. And I think what is so well done about that scene specifically, and Carrie Coon, Leslie Bibb, Michelle Monaghan, they are so well matched as actors. They're all operating on the same level. And they're meeting each other with this incredible energy that I think their scenes, they can literally just be sitting on a chair talking, and they just crackle with energy. But I do think it's interesting that they kind of give her a hard time for that, which I know, like, the times we live in, and there's a lot of baggage. And the minute they say Texas megachurch, your mind leaps to a specific stereotype. But it does kind of signal a certain intolerance that you can't win. Like, Kate is going to a traditional Christian church. And I say traditional in the sense of, like, they meet on Sunday mornings. There's probably a Sunday school and a youth pastor. And it's like what you think of when Americans think of church, that's what she's doing. And her friends are giving her a hard time. Piper is on this journey to find something, because that has not appealed to her. So she is spiritually seeking in the Eastern religion traditions, and her family's giving her crap for that. And it's like, you can't win. So, like, I feel like the suggestion to this point is, and like Chelsea with her, everything happens in threes, and I'm a whatever my sign is, and you're a this, and that's why we are the way we are. And Rick kind of blows her off about that. It's like, it just doesn't seem to matter what your belief system is. It doesn't seem to matter what your religion or where you put your faith. None of it, no one is getting any credit for any of it. It's like there's almost an assumption of inherent hollowness in all of it. And it's like, there has to be, you have to, like, I don't know. I feel like there's this needle being thread where Mike White is like, he's basically saying, whether you're pursuing something outside your, sort of native box, which for Kate would be, she's Christian in America. That's the mainstream thing to be. Piper's on this Eastern journey of spirituality, which is more kooky. Chelsea is fully a wingnut, the way that people react to her. But it's all like, people are they're just trying to get by. And Kate's defense of her church attendance, I thought, was really acute, because she's like, I like it. It brings me community. It brings me comfort. That's really all I want from it.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, and that is the good part. And then the danger under the lower part of the iceberg is what messages are being passed to you from that pulpit.
Yeah. I do think there's something that the show is saying about the secularization of American society, right? Like that the default in America is almost secular these days. And I guess you could debate whether it is or not, but like that, certainly a lot of pop culture comes at it from that perspective, which is like, oh, this is kind of, we have a skeptical, and this stuff is kind of silly. The spiritual stuff is kind of silly, and we don't really take it seriously. And like, that is the default perspective of a lot of what we see on TV.
That's how Jacqueline and Lori react to Kate. When she says she goes to church every Sunday, they laugh at her. They act like that is a stupid thing to do, which feels mean on a very, and again, I know you can get into the the politics and all of the real world of it. But I think at the very, very heart, Kate is saying, I have found a community.
Yeah.
And her quote unquote friends are shitting on it.
Yeah.
And saying that it's meaningless.
They also have the post dinner shitting on it as well. That they,
Yeah. Well, they just can't stop.
They're taking turns. Everyone, they're shitting on everyone in the post. And this is why I generally try not to talk about people I work with or I'm friends with to other people I'm friends with, because it's like, if you're doing it to them, you don't know if they're doing it to you. So,
well, as we said, the sad thing about those women is that they clearly don't have real friends.
Yeah.
This is not a real friendship. These are people who don't like each other. And they probably killed someone their senior year in high school, and they're bound by a terrible, dark secret. That's all that's holding them together.
I will say, having been to the White Lotus season 1 filming location, which is the Four Seasons of Maui, it is a thing where a lot of these resorts get built on the same beachfront property. So you can I did this. I walked from the Four Seasons, aka White Lotus, just along the beach. And as you're walking along the beach, literally the entire world transforms around you. You're going from the Four Seasons into a 3-star hotel, into a 2-star hotel, back to a 3-star hotel. And each of them have their own little societies, basically, right? Their own demographics, their price points, and so on and so forth. And that's basically what happened with these characters in episode 4, I want to say, where they go to they visit this other hotel, and it's like, oh, these are not the attractive young people that I'm interested in seeing at my hotel.
No,
these are not the aspirational people that I'm interested in.
It seems to be primarily retirees who are on package vacations.
Right. Yeah. Because she says they're together with a group, right? That's the sign.
And again, it's a thing of those Australian women. First of all, they seemed completely cool and groovy. But it's this thing of they are with a group. They're traveling in a community. They're friends. If not friends back home, they have become vacation friends. And when confronted with this, Jacqueline's reaction is to shit on it.
Yeah.
I'm like, this woman is so emotionally isolated that it almost reads as if she cannot stand the idea of anyone in her orbit having meaningful connections, whether it's through a religious community, a travel group.
Mm-hmm.
She insinuated something went wrong with Lori's job. And I'm like, follow up on that, because maybe not. Maybe Jacqueline isn't telling the real story.
Mm-hmm.
She's telling the version of the story that makes her happiest here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it makes me very, very sad for her. I think they're doing fantastic and those scenes are amazing, but they do make me incredibly sad.
I agree. And yeah, these women were telling stories about how this one woman's husband had just died last year. And I've met people like that where they're traveling and you can imagine knowing someone for decades, and then your significant other dies. And it's you have a whole other life that you live without them. It's just a brief glimpse we got into that woman's life before Jacqueline's like, I'm out. I don't want to hear any more about that. I'm out of here. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's sad, because I kind of wanted to hear more about her story.
And it came after she got recognized, which is a key, because at a place like the White Lotus, most people aren't going to say anything if they see a celebrity, because it's gauche.
Yes. Very true.
And so
they did say something to her anyway.
The main characters have commented to her, but it's not like we've seen people coming up to Jacqueline.
Yeah.
She seems to be having a vacation largely left alone, and then she goes somewhere else, immediately gets multiple times over recognized. The minute it stops and she's confronted with the reality of these women, she's like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
And it's you just wanted someone to treat you special for a minute.
Also, she's having difficulty reaching her husband, so we'll see how that goes, but I have a feeling something bad's also going to happen there. So anyway, everyone is adventuring out of the resort as Rick and Chelsea visit a serpent show in town, where Rick is super high and releases the serpents. Chelsea's bitten by a snake, her second close call with death this season so far. We also learned that Rick is angling to meet the resort owner, Sritala's husband, the enigmatic and unseen Jim. We did see him in photos, but not in real life.
Not on screen.
And he's doing so by posing as a movie producer. I did really enjoy the scene where Rick and Chelsea talk on the boat, and he becomes vulnerable with her. She's like, "Hey, I can't deal with this anymore." I kind of agree with you, Sarah. I'm like, what even is this relationship like? Like they're so opposite of each other. Is this what he's like all the time? Like, did he just fall into a bad mood the last 6 months, and previously he's been really chipper? Like,
my made up backstory.
Yeah, your headcanon. Your headcanon.
First of all, if he ever said something like "I'm a billionaire," I'd be like, there it is. But I don't think he's that rich, because they've kind of drawn a line between him and the sort of shady expats who are milling around the resort. But my backstory that I have made up is that he was probably super charming and very Walton Goggins.
Yes.
And then he saw something online or in a magazine or something that this gym person is in Thailand, and thinking about that has overtaken everything and brought up all of his dark backstory.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that he's been like this from day one, because Chelsea is too sweet to put up with that. And she really doesn't seem stupid. She seems like she sees through people pretty clearly. She's just very accepting. So she sees people's flaws and foibles, and she just accepts them. She is the opposite of Jacqueline.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you're saying. And we did see Walton Goggins turn on that charm a little bit when he pretended to be a movie producer. So it's like, oh, this is the Walton Goggins that I know and love. So anyway, let's go with Sarah's headcanon for now. But in the meantime...
Until I hear different.
In the meantime, he says that this guy, Scott Glenn, Sritala's husband, has murdered his father, and by doing so ruined his life. And he just needs to confront him before he dies and tell him that that's the case, and possibly also inflict some violence on him, TBD. Who knows?
I was like, Rick, do you have cancer? How long have they given you? How long did the doctor say that you have? Like, what is the urgency here? You're not that old. And also, I had...
No, he has said he's worried that Scott Glenn's character is going to die.
Jim is maybe... Yeah. But it's also just like, with that whole sort of subplot of Rick and what's going on with him, I still sincerely, again, like, part of the made up backstory is he has this, like, his whole identity seems to be built on, my father was murdered. I never knew my father. He was destroyed by this person. My father was a good man who was destroyed by this person. And that has in turn inflicted this generational trauma on me. And I just have this thing with the White Lotus where I'm like, sometimes a cigar is a cigar and sometimes it's not. And I'm like, I just think Rick is in for a rug pull. I just feel it, because he met with that lovely therapist and, just opening the doors of like this thing that happened to him. And you're just like, oh, that's all going to be wrong. I think he believes it. I think it's the story he's been told. But again, in my backstory that I've built up on Rick is like, why is he like this? I'm like, I just think this character's in for a really bad reveal. I think he's going to learn something that just shatters his worldview, because that's part of the serpent. And I said before, Chelsea picking the snake bracelet in the jewelry salon was interesting to me. And then in these 2 episodes, they go to the serpent show, and yeah, he's high, but Rick lets all the serpents out. And as soon as she's confronted with something sort of challenging, Chelsea falls back on Judeo-Christian. They're evil, the Garden of Eden, the serpent is the devil, all of that. But in Eastern philosophy, I actually looked it up. I was like, what is serpent iconography in Eastern religion and Eastern philosophy? And they're basically chaotic neutral. Serpents often symbolize change because they shed skin. And they represent a certain element of chaos because they cannot be tamed, but they are neither inherently good nor evil. And I think it's interesting that these serpents continue to sort of swirl around Rick. Mm-hmm. And the idea of shedding skin, and obviously what we've been presented with so far is some sort of facade. He's literally lying about being a movie producer and all that. But I just think that there's going to be, I don't think all of the snakes are an accident. And the minute that I read that they often represent change, I was like, okay, yeah. So Rick is in for a rug pull.
Well,
There's going to be something he doesn't know that will destroy his self-image.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be honestly, Sarah, it would shock me if what happened with the subplot is Rick finds the guy, he turns out to have done exactly what Rick thought, and then Rick kills him. Like that would surprise me if that's how that plot played out. Having seen the show for 2 seasons, like it generally subverts your expectations. It doesn't like necessarily go all the way in the opposite direction, but it'll just like end in a way that you're not expecting. Is kind of how I or in a way that feels thematically rich. And so for him to just be like, I've got to get revenge on this guy, and then for him to get revenge in a season that is focused on spirituality, it would just shock me that if everything was straightforward. So
well, that's what sent me to looking for the serpent iconography, because I was like, it's not an accident that we just keep seeing snakes with this guy. So what is that visual metaphor telling us? And it's like, and that's what the White Lotus does, is it does to an extent pull the rug out from under all of us. So
Rick, Chelsea, and the Ratliffs spend a day on Gary/Greg's motor yacht, which is peak White Lotus, showing miserable white people having the worst time in stunning locations. Anything to say about this yacht sequence? I mean, it does seem like a pretty rough time. Like, doesn't seem like very enjoyable to be on that boat.
Yeah, seemed pretty miserable.
Other than the view, which looks amazing.
The view is stunning. The view is beautiful. The ocean looks amazing. But yeah, it's just miserable people. It's just everyone's miserable except for Saxon because he's too dumb to be miserable. It just, I do think it's interesting, this idea that there's a lot of shady on the run they kind of imply that all of these American expats, all these weird shady men hanging out around Gary Gregg are kind of like tax dodgers and people who are hiding from something. Of course, we know Gary Gregg is hiding from something. And then Timothy is sort of in the middle of it, and he is also in that group, but also not of that group. That I still just kind of feel it, because I've known people like the Ratliffs, they don't get in trouble. So I'm just like, how are they going to get out from underneath what's going on at home with the Ratliffs? But Pam is going to have an amazing story. I feel like the coda on, I am low-key obsessed with the world of the White Lotus and what people say about these hotels. And I feel like whatever happens with the Ratliffs goes down, and Pam is going to be the most amazing source for the 10,000 word Vanity Fair article.
Which one is Pam again? For those?
She is the butler for the Ratliffs who keeps taking their phones.
Yes, that's right.
And I just feel like she is going to have the most amazing sound bites.
Yeah. Totally. Let's see. So anyway, that's the yacht sequence. I don't know if there's anything else to say about it other than I did look up that Thailand does have an extradition treaty with the United States. So
I also looked that up because I'm like, I'm pretty sure that they're gonna.
But I guess if you're far enough away, maybe they just don't bother looking for you. Depending on how big of a deal the crimes are. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? But I do think like seeing Jason Isaacs' continuing deterioration this season is pretty great. Like it's a great performance, and you can see his world is like slowly collapsing in on itself, and like he's real. And the thing is, when something like this happens, it doesn't all come in one wave like a tsunami. It comes like in fits and starts. It's like there's a moment where he realizes, oh right, the club, like everyone at the club is gonna know about. Like it comes in like all these moments, and you're seeing all these things hit him at all these various times, which I really appreciate.
Well, he's going to have to compete with actors from Slow Horses and Severance at the Emmys, but I'm a little bit like, just maybe engrave that Emmy right now. Like he's doing such an amazing job. The fact that you even have a little bit of sympathy for Timothy is amazing, but I do feel I think he's a pathetic figure. I have maybe not sympathy, maybe I have pity for him.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
he's pitiable.
Well, the thing is, like, in the grand scheme of the White Lotus, his crimes are actually not even that great. Like,
no, what did he do? Like some shady money deal?
He did a shady money deal that he didn't even intentionally do a bad thing. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so there is a kind of tragedy to what he's doing.
I
to
think
his
he
arc,
knew
I should
he
say.
was skirting some.
Yeah, sure.
And I
Sure.
have not done all my Googling, but the clues that have been dropped about his financial situation reminds me of the mess that Leonardo DiCaprio's money manager got into with Brunei. I think it was Brunei.
Wow. Oh, okay, yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I have like a mental note that I just haven't ticked off yet of like, I need to like go back and read about that situation because Mike White might have cribbed notes from that.
Absolutely.
But that is a case where who walked away scot-free? Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
So
I got to give a shout out to Scott Galloway, who is a business professor. He also hosts many podcasts. I don't agree with everything Scott Galloway says. In fact, there's many things I disagree with, but he's like a very well-known podcaster. He has an awesome TED Talk that I'd strongly recommend. And he plays Timothy's lawyer on the phone. So you hear his voice. You hear it much more this week on episode 4.
My hope is if we play ball, maybe they just focus on the money and you just serve a few months.
But I was like, I know that voice, and it's because I've spent like 100 hours listening to that guy's podcast. So anyway, shout out to Scott Galloway on this week's episode of White Lotus.
I mean, getting real people to do the off-camera phone calls, getting Kiwi
Academy Award winners,
yeah,
like high-powered podcasters, they are doing well for themselves. Sarah Mars, before we get to the final plot lines here, I want to ask if you can let people know where they can find more of your work on the internet this week.
Sure. You can find me on LaineyGossip.com or the Substack The Squawk. And that is pretty much it.
You can check out my work at decodingeverything.com. It's a free newsletter. And I also want to say that many people watch these videos on YouTube at youtube.com/@decodingtv. Also, about half of them do not subscribe to Decoding TV on YouTube. Hey, if you're watching this on YouTube, give us a subscribe. You can also listen to the podcast version, Decoding TV, wherever you get your podcasts. Okay. Let's talk about what happened the rest of the episode. Amongst the staff, things are not going much better. Belinda is anticipating her son's arrival, but she's also starting to put together the pieces about Gary/Greg and Tanya's mysterious death in Sicily last season. So there's a scene in this episode where Belinda Googles Tanya McQuad and finds out, oh my gosh, she died. And as Sarah already pointed out, that's completely implausible because totally Belinda would have heard about it like months ago. But whatever, let's accept it for this for the purposes here.
Yeah, for dramatic purpose.
I was able to screenshot that scene. And she like goes to does a Google search, and my favorite. So it shows like all the headlines: Reuters, ABC, CNN, U.S. News World Report. My favorite. By the way, every one of the headlines is all caps, just so like the viewer can see it more easily. Very unrealistic. That's not how it would go in real life. But my favorite update was from CNN, and it says CNN update. Tanya McQuad project in early development. The life and mysterious death of American millionaire Tanya McQuad has found new life. The rights have been purchased by a private producing company, even though the investigation is still ongoing. Hollywood ... and then you don't read the rest of the sentence.
Very how it would happen.
Yes, absolutely.
And I swear to God, if we find out that Rick is actually a movie producer, I think we're all just assuming he's bullshitting, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he's trying to get to this guy.
Yes.
But if he turns out to actually be a movie producer, and he's making the Tanya McQuad biopic.
Amazing twist.
Rug pull.
He's actually lying to what's her name, Chelsea, about the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And he's here on a research trip, but he can't tell anyone about it. All right. Anyway.
But what are the reviews of these resorts? Because it's like it has to be, to reference a Nate Bargatze bit, Cape Fear Serpentorium, which is kind of the bit that put him on the map in a big mainstream way. It has to be just like 5-star, 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 1-star, manager was murdered while we were at hotel. 5-star, 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 1-star, quintuple homicide off the beach, bodies washing up on shore. Like, I think HBO is really missing. And I feel like 10 years ago, they would have done this in a heartbeat. I think they're missing a step with their marketing, not having someone writing They should have a White Lotus website. They should have the White Lotus on at least for the run of the show. They don't necessarily need to do it, but they should partner with like Yelp or Expedia or something like a travel company, or even just Four Seasons, and have reviews of the resorts, and it just be like that very generic 4-star, 5-star, and then a 1-star of like manager murdered while we were at hotel. And I made a joke that was like, so somebody left the 5-star review. Manager was murdered, but we got upgraded to the Palm Suite. So I'm low-key obsessed with that.
I mean, I think it's reasonable to wonder why these White Lotus resorts at which deaths have occurred with some relative frequency haven't suffered reputationally because of that.
There has to be a podcast that's happening about is the White Lotus cursed?
Right.
There's got to be a Netflix doc. They did one for that hotel in Los Angeles, which is just an old building, and people die in old buildings. But they have to have a podcast, a documentary on Netflix. It's like White Lotus, dun dun, like the curse of the White Lotus.
I'm just gonna say this though. I feel like there is a mall I go to watch all of my movies, right? Like when I need to see movies for the film cast or whatever else, and about once every 12 to 18 months, somebody gets shot and killed at that mall. And if you look up the mall right now, I'm looking it up on Google. It has 4.3 stars average, 25,000 reviews. Right, so it's like people do not in America specifically, and around the world, people do not like having their programming interrupted, nor do they like having their vacations interrupted. And the idea that people would just press on. Despite that, does not surprise me at all.
No, I mean, how many people die on cruises every year, and people continue to flock onto cruises, even though there's like constant norovirus outbreaks and rampant larceny, and like the crime stats on cruises are just brutal, and people still go. And the crime stats on the national parks, a lot of people disappear in the national parks. It's not a big conspiracy. It's not Bigfoot. It's fucking dangerous. And people get in over their head, and bad things happen, but people still go. Like, people don't like to be interrupted. The last time I was in New Orleans, my friends and I rented a house in the Quarter that dated back to the 18th century. It was very, very, very old. And they were like, oh, it has to be haunted. I'm like, yeah, for sure. A lot of people have died here, because until after World War II, it was very normal to die in your bed at home. That's what people did for the most part. They were just old, and they just died at home. So yes, this building is almost 300 years old. For sure, a lot of people have died here. Don't Google it. Don't ruin your trip.
Indeed. All right. Let's talk about the final plot points. Mook and Guy Talk's sweet courtship takes a few tentative steps forward. But at the same time, Fabian is being a total dick about Guy Talk failing to stop the robbers. Guy Talk's boss has procured a gun, potentially of the Chekhov variety, and wants Guy Talk to learn to use it to aid in the defense of the resort. And at the end of the episode, the gun goes missing. The episode heavily implies that Timothy is the one that took it, because he's on his phone. He gets off the phone. He looks into the hut. We never see him actually holding the gun or taking the gun, but we see the gun's gone. I'm sure we'll find out shortly whether or not he actually took it, but wanted to throw that out there.
And I think we're supposed to assume that that's the gun, but I don't think we can really safely make that assumption, because we've seen that there is a darker element on the island. Like there's a criminal element. So I think we're supposed to think Chelsea's going to die because of the things that happen in Threes.
Right.
And that's the gun. But it's like, no, that's all probably red
Again,
herrings.
it's all head fake. It's all head fakes. So, and then we see also Rick board the plane to Bangkok and get closer in proximity to Jim. That's most of the stuff that happened in episodes 3 and 4. Sarah Mars, anything else you want to say about this batch of episodes?
I just connected at the Oscars that Mook is played by Lisa from Blackpink. She's credited on the show as Lalisa Manobal. I did not know that was Lisa from Blackpink's real name, but she is a huge pop star, and she's doing a great job on the White Lotus, because I just didn't clock it at all. I'm just in the world of Mook and Guy Talk. Very, very worried about Guy Talk. What I said before, I don't think he's cut out for this job. I just don't think he has the. I think he's just too nice of a person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very worried about the corrosive effect on him. And I hate Fabian. I hate him. I hate him the most. I hate him so much. I think the casting of that he's the guy from the Zone of Interest, before that was just like a trivia fact, and now I'm like, nope, that's why they got him, because he's playing a total bootlicker.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the past seasons, we have been given a little sympathy for the resort managers. Armand certainly just went
Right.
off the rails, but did not deserve what he got. And then I forget her name, but it's Sabrina Impacciatore's character, the woman running the Sicilian resort.
Valentina.
She was just it was almost sad. She was a figure that was almost sad because she was giving her whole life to this resort that gives her nothing back. But Fabian, I hate. And I think we're supposed to, because he is such a worm. Get off the ground and stop licking boots. His whole thing of like, you've got to protect. Another backstory that I have made up is that Fabian hates Guy Talk because more people like Guy Talk more than him. And I think he can't stand it.
I think we haven't seen that much of Fabian, like, for me to make that conclusion yet, but I understand, like, that it's certainly not framing him out to be a sympathetic character this season.
I was just sort of like whatever on him until his little simpering, supercilious, self-important
people supercilious.
People like you, Guy Talk, but you have to be more. You can't just wave at the cars. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, look at your shady Russian energy healer, because he's your inside man. There is going to be a whole black market robbery ring running out of that resort because he is so blind to everything, because he just has his lips fastened to Sri Tala's boots. And I truly think he does not like Guy Talk because more people like Guy Talk.
Wow.
But yeah, that was the moment that the worm turned on Fabian, when he was like, you have to be more than just waving at the cars. And I was like, oh, die right now. I hope he's the body. If Armand did not deserve what he got, if Psycho Saxon kills Fabian, I'd be like, you know what? I'm fine with that. That's a net neutral for me.
Okay. I guess we know how you really feel about that one. But anyway, I guess I also wanted to add that, like Mook playing this character, this character being played by Lisa from Blackpink does feel a little bit unrealistic to me, just because she's like probably one of the most attractive people on the planet. So she's just, like, for her to be kind of in this lowly position at this hotel, she comes into like Guy Talk's hut there, and the like she's all dressed up, and the light is coming in at exactly the right angle to be the maximally flattering.
But
I just thought
all of the Thai women at the resort, watch the background. They're all beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I really feel like they're leaning in on the stereotype of very beautiful Thai women.
Mm-hmm.
And that is who has been deliberately hired at the resort. It's just, you just look at the people, look at the extras in the background. They're all models. They're all stunning. And I think that's deliberate because of the Western stereotype of Thai women. I think they're just leaning into that on a deliberate level. But she's doing a really, again, like
the performance is great.
She's giving a great performance. And then I saw her at the Oscars and I was like, wait a minute.
The woman who performed in front of, 20 million people also, by the way, kind of has a romance thingy going on with this guard at the Four Seasons. So.
Oh, and if you really want to blow your mind, look up the behind the scenes videos, because the actor who plays Guy Talk is of Thai descent, but he's born and raised in Britain. And the accent is like...
Yeah. Amazing. That always happens. Every single time you watch one of those, like, behind the episodes, like, somebody is always speaking in an accent that is different than the one they have on the show.
Yeah.
And it's always very shocking. All right, Sarah Mars, any closing thoughts on this episode of The White Lotus, or these two episodes of The White Lotus, I should say?
I mean, I feel like the storm clouds are gathering. I do think we've had a little bit of table setting going on where it's like, okay, like I get it, what these people are like and what they're up to. But I do think by the end of episode 4, Rick heading to Bangkok, there is now a gun on the table,
Yes.
metaphorically.
Yeah.
Fabian revealing himself in the way that he did as a total worm. I was like, oh, the resort manager's not on our side. That whole scene, really go back and watch that scene where he talks to Guy Talk, and the way that Guy Talk is a fully grown man, and the way that Fabian talks down to him, and that dynamic of the white European man talking down to I'm just like, that whole scene, I'm like, there is just so much in this. And I feel like to that point, Fabian and Guy Talk had been slightly more secondary characters.
Mm-hmm.
But in that moment, I was like, I think this scene is like one of the major thesis statements of the whole show. It was gross the way he talked to Guy Talk.
I am looking forward to seeing what happens at this celebration they're going to on the boat, the woman partying. Like, I feel like there's going to be some real repercussions from those things that are going to be classic White Lotus material. So we will look forward to...
The last time people got on a boat did not end well.
Indeed. So we will look forward to discussing it. I did want to also clarify, by the way, that Sarah Mars and I were unsure of whether we're going to be able to cover like an additional batch of episodes before the finale. We will try to. I'm letting people know we will try to do that. So at the very least, we're going to try to have another episode of the podcast covering the next 2 episodes of the show. Possibly more, possibly less. We'll let you know more in the very near future. Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.